So as you're probably starting to realize, there's a relationship between mechanical stimulation of the follicle and blood flow, both of which turn out to be critical for maintaining hair and for stimulating hair growth. Not surprisingly then, an increasingly common treatment for hair loss is Botox. Botox is the brand name for what is otherwise known as botulinum neurotoxin. What is botulinum neurotoxin? Well, botulinum neurotoxin, sometimes just called botulinum for short, is a toxin that's a bacterial toxin that serves to cut the protein that leads to synaptic vesicle release. What in the world did I just say? Well, when your nerve cells communicate with one another, they do that by way of electricity, but the electricity within those nerve cells, those neurons, triggers the release of chemicals from neurons into the synapse, the little gap between neurons. And the release of those chemicals allows the next neuron to be chemically active, or in some cases, it will suppress the electrical activity of that next neuron. Botulinum neurotoxin serves to cut a protein present in neurons so that neurons cannot release the chemicals that cause other neurons to be active. So this actually is pretty serious. If you were to get botulinum neurotoxin injected into your muscle, you would be paralyzed because the nerves that control contraction of the muscles would not be able to control the release of that chemical onto the muscle, which makes it contract. Now, botulinum neurotoxin is commonly used in what's called Botox. Botox is something most people are familiar with because people get it injected in and around their wrinkles, because many wrinkles are triggered by not just loss of tensile strength in the skin, but rather the nerves around the skin and in the skin are hypercontracted, which causes wrinkles. So for instance, I have crow's feet. I like to think that's because I've laughed a lot and smiled a lot, and it's probably also because I've squinted a lot in my lifetime. I have crow's feet because the nerves there have pinched the skin on either side of my eyes, and that's given me little creases there that are sometimes referred to as crow's feet. Botox injections can be applied to the scalp in order to relieve tension of the scalp. And in hearing that, it should be obvious why Botox is being used to try and offset hair loss. It's decreasing the squinting, if you will, or the tensile nature of the scalp skin so that more blood flow can arrive at that stem cell follicle area. So Botox treatment to the scalp is actually becoming pretty common. There are a couple requirements with this Botox treatment. First of all, it has to be done by somebody who's really skilled. There are numerous images online and websites online of so-called Botox fails, where people have gotten too much Botox, or the injections have been done too deep, or not at the correct locations on people's face or scalp, and it can give them droopy scalp or droopy eyes. All sorts of cosmetic nightmares can occur with Botox. The second thing to understand is that Botox does eventually wear off. That botulinum neurotoxin doesn't stick around forever. And provided it's done correctly at the correct dosages, it doesn't actually kill the neurons that cause that tension of the skin. So Botox injections have to be done repeatedly. The efficacy of Botox for offsetting hair loss is not clear. There aren't a lot of large-scale clinical studies on this just yet, but it does seem to be at least one reasonably safe alternative to things like minoxidil. Although I think if one were to just want to increase blood flow to the scalp, things like low-dose tadalafil, which doesn't seem to carry any of the side effects that minoxidil can carry, we talked about those side effects earlier, that would probably be the better alternative. Botox is a fairly invasive procedure, but some people opt for Botox treatment. In fact, there's a syndrome called cutis verticus gyrata. Some of you have probably seen this. It's more typical in men, although it does occur in women. It literally means a lumping of the skin on the scalp, or gyri of the scalp. Gyri or gyrus pertains to the Latin word knee, so it means bump or knee. And so anytime you hear the word gyra in neuroscience or in biology, you're talking about a bump. You sometimes see people will have ridges in the back, or it looks as if the skin was pushed together, kind of like a Shar-Pei dog, but on the scalp. People with cutis verticus gyrata almost always experience pattern hair loss.